So good morning, everybody. This is obviously a different way of celebrating a ton of hard work that went into creating a very important piece of legislation, and that is this economic development bill, which is coming at not a nick of time too soon. We all know how much work we have to do to sort of help communities and help people get back on their feet when we get to the what I would call kind of the post-pandemic period. And this legislation has got a lot of really important elements to help us get from here to there. And it had a ton of great work that was done by many of the people who are going to speak. But I would also say there's a ton of work that was done by so many others to get this over the goal line. And there are a number of speakers who I'm sure will focus on particular parts of the legislation that mattered to them or that they were particularly involved in. But I do want to mention a few things. The first is this bill contains $626 million of capital authorization for the Commonwealth to put to work. It comes on the heels of a variety of other initiatives that the legislature has worked with us on to do what we can to try to support so many of our businesses and our people as we work through this pandemic. But in particular in this legislation, there's money for what I call community building, which is incredibly important. There's money for sort of maintaining our business competitive position and providing support for what we might call the businesses, the enterprises, the jobs of the future. There's also skill building money in here. And I take a lot of satisfaction in the collaborative effort that's gone on between our administration and the legislature to ensure that every one of these economic development bills that we've done since we've taken office has included resources and program support for skill building and workforce development. That's not normally what ends up in an economic development bill, but in this day and age, it's a critical part of how you get people into opportunities that they can benefit from and that we as a Commonwealth then benefit from as well. There's also something that many of us worked on for several years, which was and many of the speakers worked on as well, which is the housing choice legislation, which should make it possible for us to come out of the gate post-pandemic with a framework from a regulatory point of view that will make it possible for us to build a lot more housing. Many of you have heard me say before that we used to build a lot of housing in Massachusetts up until about 1990. And for the past 30 years, we've built less than half the new housing that we built every decade, one after another, after another, after another for a very long time. And I think in many ways, this piece of the legislation is going to play a major role in helping all of us think about the role of downtowns and the role of communities generally as we deal with the fact that, you know, the future of work post-pandemic is going to be a lot different than the future of work was before the pandemic. And I think this legislation, which is the culmination of almost 2 years worth of work by a lot of people, has a number of really important elements in here that will help us move forward. And with that, I'm going to toss a ceremonial signature on it. And I kind of wish all of you could see this. And I wish we were standing on the I wish we were in front of the grand staircase in the State House, and I certainly hope at some point we will be. But just for the record, I am signing this on your behalf and on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth. And I want to thank the legislature for their hard work on this. It was an incredibly important piece of work, and I know how difficult these bills can be to get over the goal line, especially when you're trying to figure out how to debate and discuss in the midst of a pandemic. So kudos and big thanks to our colleagues in the legislature for getting this done. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that we put this to work in ways that will help us reopen the Commonwealth and help people find their way back into productive employment. And with that, I will turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thanks, Gov.
Done.
Thanks, Gov. Thanks for everyone coming together. It's great to have a moment we can celebrate the good work and partnership that we are so proud of here in the Commonwealth. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a walk on memory lane back 2019, which seems so long ago. Secretary Kennealy and I led an economic development team along with Ann Margaret Ferrante and Senator Eric Lesser. And when we were visiting places and spending time with people, we spent a year basically with 9 engagement sessions and deep dives to some key sectors to really understand how we could continue to grow in all places in our Commonwealth. And we developed a plan, and it's centered around partnerships for growth with some key areas that we would focus on. Clearly, community development, everyone knows and appreciates what's happened in our downtowns and main streets, small businesses, restaurants, developing that character that make communities so special that we love. We know that housing, a key piece of strategy, and having housing of choice for community to help them grow their opportunities. Competitiveness, we're not alone in this global economy. We need to be as competitive as possible as a Commonwealth and helping our businesses compete for the work, jobs, and opportunities here in our Commonwealth. And of course, people, investing in the talent that we need to power up businesses, foster the entrepreneurial spirit and the job creation that clearly is a pillar for our Commonwealth. And those 4 key areas were definitely the bones of our economic development bill. And of course, 2020 threw a curveball to us. And we said we need to make sure this economic development plan also reflects the ability to stabilize and support the businesses of our Commonwealth. So giving it that additional lens was really important to all of us. And I just also want to thank the business communities here that helped inform us, as well as the municipal leaders that are literally the boots on the ground, on the front line, helping all of us execute on the plans and take the resources that we share with local communities and turn it into action. And one of the things we learned from our municipal leaders who have to actually take the funds and do something with them, with their business community, is to make it as easy and streamlined as possible. We started what's called the Community One Stop, which takes 10 of our key programs and turns them into one area where businesses and communities can apply to receive those funds. I think that's going to be really important. And yesterday we released the expression of interest so that you can sort of think about as a community what your key opportunities are and how you can better position and compete for the funds that the legislature and our administration is making available. And I think this is really important, not only to stabilize the businesses with the Mass Growth Capital program that we have underway now, the $700 million program reaching, I think, almost 10,000 businesses now, but to really position ourselves for growth and opportunities across the whole spectrum of our communities, small, rural, and urban areas, and really rebound, which is the word that I hope that we take away from our meeting today, that we not only want to recover and stabilize, we want to rebound, and we want to be as competitive and well-positioned as possible as a Commonwealth to make sure that people are reaching their full employment everywhere. So I just want to say thank you. Got a lot of work ahead of us, but good work as we continue to monitor the virus and the vaccination rollout, to focus on the economics that stabilize individuals' lives, families' lives, communities, and our Commonwealth. I also just want to thank Secretary Kennealy and his team who worked really hard on this bill, as well as his partnership with the legislature to get this done. And it's been a pleasure to work with you, not only in the creation of this bill, but also in reopening our businesses in the Commonwealth and partner in recovery here in our Commonwealth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Kennealy.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Always a pleasure to work with you on these important issues of housing and economic development. And As I was thinking about today, I got thinking about all the travels around the state that the governor, lieutenant governor, and I did in 2019 around housing and economic development issues. And we just heard in so many places how a 30-year fall off in housing production, coupled by a 30-year increase in demand, has meant that for so many of our citizens, the housing they need is either unaffordable or unavailable. And we started calling this the housing crisis. And we did that long before we'd ever heard of COVID-19. And so, for example, as the lieutenant governor mentioned, she and I led 9 regional engagement sessions around the state for the economic development plan. We heard from 1,200 folks. In all those sessions, we heard that we're never going to create the kind of inclusive, robust economy we want unless we solve the housing crisis. We won't be able to compete long-term economically the way we want until we solve that crisis. We embarked on Housing Choice Palooza, as it's been called. There were 13 stops around the state from Williamstown to Provincetown to build and demonstrate support for housing choice. And we heard from the leaders in all of those communities that we really need to change the game. We had to create very different conditions so that they can build the housing of all kinds that works for their communities. And then also that summer, I embarked on something we call the Affordable Housing Tour across Massachusetts. We did 8 days, 17 cities and towns, 28 developments to see the work up close. It was a wonderful experience I'll never forget. We were joined by over 1,000 people along the way. And we saw these amazing housing developments. We saw what we want to build. It was housing for seniors and veterans and the formerly homeless. It was housing that re-enlivens downtown, smart developments near public transit, great developments. And the message we heard every stop we went there was, we want to do more. Can you help us do more? And so we took all that input over 2019. And with that, we created a plan and a bill. And the governor filed the bill. We all went up to Salem on March 4th to kind of celebrate. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened. And the summer of 2020 happened. And, at a moment when we all focused more on issues of racial equity, we also saw the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. And we came to understand that housing conditions were a root cause of that impact. We also talked about how zoning in our nation historically has been a tool to exclude for much of our nation's history. And we felt it was time to really take a big step to build more inclusive and healthier communities. And we told ourselves we had to get housing choice done. And we got it done. And so now we're back here in Salem virtually today to celebrate. There's a few groups of folks I want to thank for their work on this. First, to thank my team who took all of those 2019 conversations and turned them into policy, first the plan, then the bill, and a strategy to advocate and get that bill done. This was work that was really important, done really well, and very grateful to my team. Second, to the incredible Housing Choice Coalition, the group of partners joining us today. I'm going to read the names, and I hope I don't forget anybody. We have Gary Campbell representing the Home Builders and Remodelers Association. We have Adam Chapdelaine representing Mass Municipal Association, Mark Drayson from MAPC, Teresa Hatton from the Mass Association of Realtors, Rachel Heller from CHAPA, Joe Kreisberg from MACDC, Tamara Small from NIOP, and I think I got everybody. It has been so great working with all of you. You all got many, many calls from me over 2 years. We had a lot of conversations. I think Joe called me back from Ireland in the middle of the night once, if I remember correctly. But we had a lot of conversations, and I have so enjoyed getting to know you and your organizations, and have been so inspired by your steadfast commitment to improving housing all across the Commonwealth. And of course, finally, I want to thank the legislators here today, Representatives Michaelwitz, Honan, Wan, Ferrante, and Tucker, Senators Lesser, Crichton, O'Connor, and Lovely, for your partnership on all things housing and economic development. You and your colleagues really put in the effort to get this done. To Senator Crichton and Representative Honan, the chairs of the Housing Committee this past session, thank you for your incredibly hard work and constant communication with our office. It's been a real pleasure working with both of you. We also had a lot of conversations over the course of the last couple of years, and you played outsized roles in making sure that the first significant zoning reform in decades got done under your watch. So thank you. I want to thank the Economic Development Planning Council, which included Mayor Driscoll and included the legislative chairs of the Economic Development and Emerging Technologies Committee, Chair Ferrante and Chair Lesser here with us today, for your commitment to the process, your engagement. It's been great working with all of you as well. And that plan we put in place really did provide the blueprint for this economic development bill and for today's legislation. So thank you all for a terrific effort and a terrific outcome. I think with that, we're going to turn it over to some of our legislative colleagues. I think first up is Representative Michaelwitz, who serves as chair of House Ways and Means, and then Senator Eric Lesser, who chairs the Joint Committee on Economic Development. We'll hear from both Rep. Michaelwitz and Senator Lesser.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate it. And personally, thank you for all the work that you provided to get this bill over the finish line. The late night phone calls we were having, I know, there was a lot of moving parts to this legislation, as my colleagues in the legislature can attest to. And it did come down to the wire. We literally got it done on the last day of the legislative session. It was one of the last bills that we got done. And actually, I think it got done past midnight, but no one was counting. But I'm glad we were able to get it passed and we were able to get it done. And, there are so many sectors in this bill, or so many pieces of this bill that are going to be so helpful to so many sectors of our economy, particularly the ones that are struggling. I know there's a lot of housing folks on here, but, I'm particularly excited about the restaurant discussion and helping out our struggling tourism industry. This bill is going to help that tremendously. It's going to offer critical support for struggling restaurants by capping that third-party vendor fees that they are paying for delivery charges at 15%. And I talked to a number of restaurants in my district just this past the last couple of days, and they've been telling me what an impact this has been having already. They're seeing it, firsthand, and the amount of money that they're having to, or the less amount of money that they're having to pay out during, obviously, a very critical time. And in particular on that issue, I want to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor for creating the legislative fix that was necessary there, so we could avoid the 90-day window. We did have a lot of moving parts, so we slipped up a little bit on that one, and we appreciate you guys coming up there and fixing that for us. It also is going to allow hotels to work with local entities to create tourism destination marketing districts, which I think a lot of us feel that local travel or international travel is obviously going to take a long time to get back to. So local travel is going to be very important, and us being competitive with other major hubs along the East Coast. This piece is going to help us do that over the next couple of years here, in particular, for us to be able to get some tourism marketing dollars out there and to make sure that people love coming to Massachusetts, Boston, but we just got to remind them of why it is such a the hub of the universe and the hub of the place of where everyone wants to come to. There's also a boosting of low-income housing tax credits, which I'm very excited about. I know many of on this call are interested in. And as for the housing choice piece, obviously there was a lot of back and forth on this. It took a couple sessions to get done, but Chair Honan was very persistent on this, and I know Governor, if you remember, you went to the Boston Business Bureau the beginning of last session, and I think I was the only House member in the audience there, and I think you told everyone if it doesn't get passed to come tackle me.
Hey, whatever it takes, Mr. Chairman, whatever it takes.
I tried to do some blocking along the way. You did that. At the end of the day, it worked out, and I think it was an important piece. I think we were all, certainly, despite the time it took, I think we all had an interest in getting it done. It was just a matter of how we could get it done, and this vehicle ended up being the best avenue for that success. And so I want to thank Speaker Mariano for his guidance in getting the bill over the finish line, and I also want to thank my conferees on the House side in particular. Ann Margaret Ferrante, who could not be here today, and Donald Wong, both champions of economic development, both champions of small businesses, both have districts that rely heavily on small businesses. So this was a huge win for them. And I also, in particular, want to thank my Senate conferees, in particular Eric Lesser. We had an interesting ride together over the last couple months. We had some fun with it, but I appreciate his friendship and the work that he put into this, along with Senate, including the Senate President. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. And could I pass it over to my counterpart here in the Senate, Eric Lesser?
Can everybody hear me? everybody
Yeah.
can see me. I guess everything's been said, but not everybody has said it. So I'll give my piece. But first, I want to thank you, Governor, for really prioritizing this bill and the economic development package across the board. I remember shortly after COVID-19 broke, Secretary Kennealy and I had a phone call, and I kind of asked, I said, hey, are we still doing the ECDEV bill? And, he unequivocally and unambiguously said, absolutely. Still did take a few months, but it was a major priority, I know, of yours. And I want to thank you, Lieutenant Governor Polito. It feels like a long time ago that we kicked off that economic listening session, and I think it was in Natick, but appreciate your leadership. And I do want to just amplify and lift up the work of my colleague Brendan Crichton, our housing chair, especially the housing components, which are obviously one of the focuses of today's conversation, were really crafted by him and his committee, and certainly Representative Honan as well. And I want to thank Senator Lovely, and of course want to thank Senator Rodrick, Chair Rodrick, and Senate President Spilker for their focus on this as well. And it was fun working with you, Mr. Chairman, and it was a very complicated bill with a lot of moving parts, but I'll just leave by saying this, even before COVID-19, we knew how strong Massachusetts was economically, but also where we were falling short. We knew that despite this being a great state, people could not afford to live here because housing had gotten out of control, rents had gone up and continued to go up, and too many of our employers couldn't find skilled employees, and too many of our citizens couldn't find high-paying work. And at the heart of this bill, that's really what it's about, is closing those gaps, and all of those issues just went into hyperdrive as a result of COVID-19. And one provision in particular that I'm particularly proud of that I do want to lift up as well is the more than 1 million student loan borrowers in Massachusetts, which will get new consumer protections as a result of this legislation that was ceremonially signed today, but I know it was officially signed a few weeks ago. And we know that as we continue to rebuild our economy and dig ourselves out of the COVID recession, student loans and student loan debt in particular are something that we're going to need to keep an eye on. And just want to also thank Chair Mikowitz in particular for his championing of the restaurants. We know that sector is really in distress right now. And this bill is both going to plug needed gaps for struggling businesses to get them to the other side and lay down the markers and make the changes we need to have a more equitable and far-reaching recovery into the future. So thank you again, and congratulations to everyone.
Thank you, Senator and Representative. Thank you so much for your work as co-leads of the conference committee that got this over the finish line. So thank you, and great to hear from you. I now want to introduce Adam Chapdelaine, who's town manager in Arlington, the newly minted president of the MMA, and he's been a great advocate for zoning reform, testified in support of housing choice back in 2019, and great to have you here, Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My main message from the MMA and cities and towns across the Commonwealth today is one of thanks. Thanks to the coalition that's on the screen today, and thank you to the leadership of the governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Kennealy, and of course, the House and the Senate and their leadership for bringing this across the finish line. I want to share a story that really, I think, gave me hope years ago that we would get here today. And I remember very clearly on a Friday afternoon, it was probably 4 or 5 o'clock. I was standing in my driveway about to go pick up my kids from preschool, and my phone rang, and it was a number I didn't recognize, and I picked it up, and it was Secretary Kennealy. And I had never been called by a cabinet secretary before, right? So I was pretty impressed that I got that call. And his call was just to check in with me about where I think stood on housing choice. From the local government perspective, what I was hearing, who I was talking to. And it was in that moment that I had hoped that we would get here today, because I knew we had a champion in the governor's cabinet who was going to help get this thing across the finish line. So tremendous thanks to Secretary Kennealy for his work and his team's work. But I also know it wouldn't have got there if he didn't have sort of the sponsorship and leadership of Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, giving him the support he needed to do that work and get it across the finish line. And of course, again, it goes without saying, as Representative Michaelwood said, it took right up to the last minute, but the House and the Senate collaborated to get it done, and its importance in getting done was really critical. So with that, I want to say thank you. And perhaps most of all, from the local government perspective, I now look forward to working with local government leaders across the Commonwealth and putting it to work. Putting to work the economic investments that this bill has, and most specifically putting to work housing choice and finding ways across all 351 cities and towns to expand housing opportunity for people across this Commonwealth. So thank you very much.
Adam, thanks so much. I really appreciate the kind words, and thank you so much for your partnership. You know, I always felt like through this process, we got a lot of voices engaged, but I think hearing from the local officials that really wanted to develop this housing and recognize we had to change the game to do so. I think those are very, very important voices, and yours, Adam, was certainly among those. And another local voice who was incredibly important to this is Mayor Kim Driscoll from Salem, who hosted us last year to celebrate the filing of the bill, hosted us as part of Housing Choice Palooza back in April of 2019. We also had an engagement session in Salem. So we spent a fair amount of time in Salem, but Mayor, you've been such an outspoken advocate for zoning reform, all of what you want to get done in housing. So great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you,
Mayor
Secretary.
Driscoll, I just have to say that I think Secretary Kennealy has understated how outspoken you've been on this issue. I live down the street from you in Swampscott, which is next door, and I could hear you outspeaking on housing choice almost every day for the past couple of years. So I'm thrilled to have you as part of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for including me. And it really does matter. I think obviously this bill is so comprehensive. There's so many pieces of it to celebrate. But here in Salem, I think we're cheering loudest about the housing choice component. I wish we were back at Notch, Secretary Kennealy, during the Housing Palooza, because it would be good to toast this effort. But I just, as a local leader in a city like Salem, where 50% of renters are housing challenged, 25% of homeowners are housing challenged. For every 4 low-income families, there's 1 affordable unit. And right now, today, there are 126 homeless students in Salem Public Schools. I'm cheering loudly because this matters every single day to people who live in communities like Salem, and as Adam said, across the Commonwealth. We know housing impacts so many aspects of people's lives. Just being late on the rent can create stress and trauma for families. And today we're going to file an all affordable accessory dwelling unit ordinance today for the 3rd time. And I feel like really positive that it's going to pass. We were a community that was the poster child for losing 7-4 votes. I'm grateful for Representative Tucker and Senator Lovely's support, and people who have championed some of these local housing policies for us here as well. And can't say enough about the ability for us to put these tools to work to help people every single day. So thank you both to Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito for your perseverance, and to our legislative leaders and all of the advocates. I see Mark from MAPC and Rachel from Chapin. There were so many of us who were, I think equally times frustrated and excited, but really grateful that this came over the goal line. And that takes a collective effort of our legislative leaders. And I want to thank you because we are excited about the opportunities to think about smart growth zoning, to put housing in places where it makes sense, and most importantly, to service the needs of residents. As someone who has older adult students, older adult children now, I really worry about their ability to stay local, given the rising housing prices we're seeing that are far outpacing their or lots of people's ability to afford it. So grateful for this, looking forward to putting it to work, and thanks for including me in the ceremony.
Mayor, thanks so much. Very much appreciate your partnership on this one. I think with that, we turn it back to Governor Baker to close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me just say this. By the way, Chairman Michaelwitz, I would just like to point out that while the Economic Development Bill may have been signed at several minutes after midnight, as you and Senator Lesser both pointed out, I just want you to know that it was actually signed much earlier, or passed, excuse me. I just want to point out that it was actually passed by the legislature much earlier than the Economic Development Bill that got passed in 2016. That one got passed about a half hour, maybe more than a half hour after midnight at the end of the so-called legislative session, when the clocks suddenly stop and all that good stuff happens. That's where the magic is. It's a very funny business. And I think for many of us, we always knew this one would make it through. What we didn't know was, what would ultimately be in it and how that would all play out. And I just want to say to Senator Crichton and Representative Honan, both of whom I and other members of our administration attended housing events with you folks in your districts in the early days of this. And I was listening to Mike go through sort of the litany of places he'd been and people he talked to. And, a lot of the people who are on this screen today were shoulder to shoulder and face to face and working this for a long time. I mean, the housing choice piece basically is 4 years. And I remember both Chairman Crichton and Chairman Honan saying at the events that I was at with them that one way or another they were going to get this done. And for all of us, I think this began as a discussion and a debate about affordability and supply and location and a whole bunch of other things. But one of the things I want y'all to think about a little bit is, I remember being at an event in Salem and Mayor Driscoll ran through some of the numbers she ran through today then, but she also put it in this framework of work, live, play, right? And, I think you folks have heard me talk about the fact that the future of work, not so much what people do, but where they do it and how they do it. As a result of the pandemic, I think is going to undergo some very significant changes. And one of the underappreciated opportunities associated with this housing choice legislation is going to be how all of us work together to think about our strategies around downtowns. And, let's suppose for a minute that what ends up happening post-pandemic is that people sort of go back to work, right? I mean, I'm one of these people who thinks, based on all the conversations I've had with employers across the Commonwealth, and in some cases with governors around the country, the sentiment out there is that people may not be 5 days a week remote, but they will probably be 2, 3, 4 days a week remote. That a lot of businesses have figured out they can do a lot of things virtually that they didn't know they could do. And that's going to change commuting patterns and the amount of time people spend in the so-called office. And that's going to have real impact on downtowns across Massachusetts. And if one of the things that comes out of this is a series of strategies in communities across Massachusetts where people start to think real hard about how they turn what was once commercial space into residential space, so that they can create the live, work, play that will be a different kind of live, work, play than the one we were talking about before, to sort of revitalize certain parts of their downtowns and their communities generally. Housing choice will play a huge role in making that happen. And I think this tool in the toolbox, we have no idea yet how big a deal it's going to be as people deal with some of the issues and opportunities and challenges that are going to come post-pandemic. And I also think many of the elements of this bill that so many worked on so hard are going to make a big difference as well. And to everybody, I just want to say, this was worth the work. And coming out of this pandemic, I do believe that many of the elements of this, both on the policy side and on the money side, are going to make a huge difference with respect to our ability to help our people and our communities make the adjustments that this pandemic has put forth for so many. And I can't wait to get past this and be able to get back out in the community and start taking a look at all the hard work and all the great stuff that all of you are going to be doing with this new toolbox in hand. So thank you very much to everybody for their role, their participation, their advocacy. And we look forward to turning the words on the paper into projects in your communities across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.